Hi, I'm Natalie. On the morning of my birthday, my father looked me dead in the eyes and said, "There's no place for you here. No warning, no fight. Just gone." By nightfall, I uncovered a secret they'd buried for years. My sister forged trust papers, my mom's voice, silenced. And yet, in that same day, I became the heir. But how? I woke up before the sun had a chance to touch the curtains. My 38th birthday. No balloons, no breakfast in bed, no whispered surprises behind the walls. But I wasn't expecting much, just maybe a cup of coffee I didn't make myself, or a quiet, happy birthday from my dad. Even silence can be gentle when it's thoughtful. Instead, the house sat heavy and hollow, like it had exhaled me in my sleep. My brothers were gone before dawn, probably off to their usual weekend golf rounds or brunches with wives who had long stopped pretending I mattered. No text, no call. It was like I'd slipped off the calendar. Again. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, flipping the same eggs I made every morning for Dad. I could still hear Mom's voice from years back, telling me that love wasn't loud, it was consistent. "You're the glue, Natalie," she used to say, "but even glue dries out." My mind drifted to a birthday long ago. Maybe I was 10. I got a dog-eared book wrapped in recycled newspaper. "At least you got something," Dad had said when I looked disappointed. That phrase stuck. At least, at least, at least. I learned early that expectations were things you had to clean up after. Today, though, I still wanted something small. A nod, a flicker. Something to remind me I hadn't become invisible in my own house. Dad came in just as I poured his coffee. No happy birthday. Just a cough, a grunt, and a reach for the remote. "Morning," I offered, trying to keep my voice light. He nodded at the window, not at me. "We need to talk." I paused, spatula mid-air. "Sure. About what?" He didn't look up. "This house. It's getting crowded." Crowded? It was just him and me. "I think it's time you moved out, Natalie. You're almost 40. You don't belong here anymore." I dropped the spatula. The sizzle from the stove hissed louder than the silence between us. "Are you serious?" I asked. "I've been here, taking care of you." His eyes didn't blink. "And I appreciate that. You've done your part. But it's time." My hands trembled. Not from fear, from betrayal. This wasn't just a conversation. It was an eviction from the only role I'd let define me. I swallowed hard. "Did someone say something to you?" He shrugged. "Does it matter? It's what's right." I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, hollowed out. The breakfast burnt. I stepped outside without shoes. The Arizona air was dry but not cold. I needed to breathe, to remember. The job offer in Chicago 5 years ago. The one I turned down because Dad had a stroke and needed me. The man who now told me I didn't belong. I remembered how my friends stopped calling, how dates turned into reschedules, how my world shrank to pill bottles, doctor visits, and reheated dinners. And for what? So he could toss me aside like a tenant whose lease had expired? I wandered to the garage, looking for a distraction. That's when I saw it. A box. Labeled Natalie. I opened it. Inside were all the gifts I'd ever given him, still wrapped. A watch, a sweater, a mug with "Best Dad Ever." Not a single one had been touched. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just stood there, heart pounding, pulse roaring. This was love, returned to sender. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. It was Mr. Simmons, the family lawyer, said there was a meeting. "Estate matters," he said. "Your presence is required." I almost laughed. Estate. No one had told me anything. And yet, I went. The meeting was at his office. Downtown. Sterile walls, neutral carpet. My brothers were already there, legs crossed, arms folded. My father sat in the corner, flipping through a magazine like none of this concerned him. I took a seat. The lawyer cleared his throat. Before your mother passed, she made some changes to her will, he began. I stiffened. Mom? He continued, unfolding the papers with deliberate care. She made a separate allocation of her personal assets, independent of your father's estate. Every eye in the room turned toward me. She left everything she owned, her half of the house, the savings account, the trust, exclusively to Natalie. Silence. Dead. Thick. Bitter. No one spoke. My father stood, tucked the magazine under his arm, and walked out without a word. I didn't look at my brothers. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the afterthought. I got to the lawyer's office 20 minutes early, not because I was eager, but because silence in my own house had started to feel heavier than any courtroom. I wore jeans and a black sweater. Nothing dramatic, but I made sure to look steady. I was tired of shrinking to make room for everyone else's noise. The receptionist glanced up, but didn't say a word. I took a seat at the far end of the waiting area, facing the door. One by one, my brothers and their wives strolled in. Grant first, smug as ever, followed by Lydia, wearing sunglasses indoors, like grief was something she could accessorize. Then came Michael, half smile and all ego, trailed by his wife Amy, who didn't even bother to look at me. No one said hello, not even a nod. They leaned in toward each other, whispering until they noticed I was watching. Then silence. It felt like high school all over again. Same people, just older costumes. When the paralegal finally ushered us into the conference room, it felt less like a family meeting and more like a standoff. My father was already seated, back straight, hands folded. He didn't look at me. Mr. Simmons, the family attorney, sat at the head of the table with a stack of documents that looked thicker than they had any right to be. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Before we begin, he said, I need to share something that may be surprising to some of you. My stomach tightened. Your mother requested a private reading of a portion of her will with Natalie months before her passing. That reading was delayed at the insistence of Mr. Dawson. I turned to my father. He stared straight ahead like he hadn't just been outed for withholding legal intent. Grant scoffed. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means, Simmons said calmly, your mother made specific decisions she wanted Natalie to hear first. Decisions that were intentionally postponed. I didn't blink. I wanted them to see me steady. Simmons pulled a sealed envelope from his folder. This is in her handwriting, dated 6 months before her passing. He opened it and began to read. To my daughter Natalie, my only caretaker, my steady presence, the one who never asked, yet always gave. This is not about fairness. It is about truth. Every word struck like a heartbeat against concrete. My brothers shifted in their seats. My father's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Simmons continued reading, until he got to the part none of them expected. A separate trust was established under Natalie's name. Investments I made over the years, quietly, for the day she might need them. I heard the intake of breath before the room exploded. What is this? Michael barked. You can't be serious. Lydia added, she must have manipulated her. Mom wouldn't have done this knowingly. I kept my voice low. She made her choice long before today. You're just now catching up to it. My father stood up, not to leave, but to reclaim ground. She's unstable, he said to Simmons. She canceled her wedding, she needed therapy, she was a wreck for months. You think that's someone who should hold power over anything? I looked right at him. Healing isn't forgetting, it's remembering without rage. That's what Dr. Langston said. You'd like her. His eyes flinched, just for a moment. That was enough. He sat down. The arguing started again. My brothers, their wives, their voices overlapping like knives in a drawer, all fighting for something they never earned. I didn't speak. I let them swing at shadows while I stayed still. Simmons finally shut the folder with finality. There are no legal loopholes. The documents are clean. Your mother's wishes are fully enforceable. My father muttered, "You don't deserve this." I looked at him, calm. Maybe not. But she knew I'd never use it to hurt anyone. I stood, thanked Simmons, and left the room. Outside, the sun was setting behind the Scottsdale buildings, casting long shadows on the parking lot. I stood there for a while, letting the heat settle into my chest. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just refusing to sit down. I reached for my car door. That's when I saw it, just beyond the glass. A figure standing near the driver's side, arms crossed. It wasn't over. I drove home under a sky bruised with sunset, Arizona light fading into dusty rose. The house looked the same from the street, lights on in a few upstairs windows, silence elsewhere. I parked, exhaled, and let the screen door click behind me as if snapping shut a door inside. After the will reading, returning felt like stepping back into someone else's memory. The hallway was dim, empty wine glasses on the coffee table, half-folded laundry in the basket, but no laughter, no familiar voices. I walked past framed photos, little me with mom, dad standing proud, siblings smiling together. In each one, I saw why I stayed invisible so long. Then I paused at Mom's bedroom. It was forbidden territory for years, too many ghosts. Tonight, I opened the door. Lavender still hung in the air, soft and stubborn. The bedspread smelled faintly of Mom. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the top drawer of her nightstand. Under old receipts and letters I didn't know existed lay a leather journal, Mom's handwriting. My chest tightened before I flipped it open. One entry, overheard conversation, Dad and Grant planning, quiet words, ensuring that Natalie never holds power. I read it twice. Betrayal, not sudden. Something built, brick by brick. It wasn't just about the birthday. It never was. My rejection was part of a design. I shut the journal and moved to Mom's closet. Behind a loose panel, tucked away, faded documents in her pen, evidence of deals, financial statements, signatures, tax records, letters to a private investigator, warnings never passed to me. I held them in trembling hands. Father's name, brother's name, but mostly silence around those names. Memories spilled. High school science fair. My project ruined. The ribbon awarded to someone else. I remember seeing Mom's disappointed smile, trying to comfort me. I remember trying to be stronger. I remember telling myself it was just sabotage, not a proof of worth. In the journal, Mom wrote about that too, how she tried to protect me quietly, how she believed in me when no one else did. You are not what they say. You are what you choose to do with truth, she wrote. The words felt like truth wrapped in tears. I sat breathing, let the hurt settle, but not drown me. I thought of what justice might look like when the damage is old, when the betrayal has seeped into everyday life. Maybe justice isn't loud. Maybe justice is someone finally seeing you. I closed the drawer, taking Mom's journal and the documents with me. I walked through that dark hallway, past the photos, past empty rooms that felt heavy. I paused by the front door. In the lonely mirror across the foyer, I saw someone standing behind me, just for a blink, but enough. It wasn't Mom. It wasn't Dad. It was me. Morning came fast. Sleep didn't. I was up before the sun, pacing in my room with the folder clutched to my chest like it might vanish if I set it down. The folder with my mother's journal, the trust papers, the proof. I got dressed with a kind of quiet precision, Dark slacks, navy blouse, flats, no jewelry, no distractions. My hair pulled back tight, the way Mom used to do hers when she meant business. I stared at myself in the mirror before I left. I didn't look angry. I looked ready. The community center sat at the edge of town, where the desert gave way to rows of beige buildings and half-empty parking lots. The sign outside read, "Preserving Our Family's Heritage, a Local Dialogue." Verity and Giles were hosting it. Barely anyone knew about it unless you were part of the inner circle. But I showed up anyway. There were folding chairs set up in rows, a weak pot of coffee on the back table, familiar faces, people I used to babysit for. A few retirees from Mom's church group, my old high school teacher, some strangers. Verity entered from the side door like a politician, trailed by her husband and one of my brothers. She saw me, didn't flinch, just looked past me like I wasn't there. But I was, very much there. She stepped to the podium and began. Her voice was polished, but empty. She talked about quiet legacy, family values, and unspoken sacrifices. She dropped names, my father, Grant, Giles, all painted in glowing light. Not a word about me, not a word about the woman who fed our father oatmeal every morning for 5 years while he learned to walk again. I raised my hand, slowly. She hesitated, then nodded. If someone gives years to something behind the scenes without applause, does that mean their contribution doesn't matter? A few people shifted in their seats. Giles looked down. Verity's jaw tightened. She answered with a vague nod toward duty and humility, something about how some roles aren't visible, but that doesn't mean they're unvalued. It was the kind of line written for PR flyers. Then someone stood up, a man in the back, Mr. Callahan. He used to work with Mom at the library. His voice cut through the room. "Didn't your mother start a trust in Natalie's name? I remember her saying, 'My daughter doesn't need a spotlight, but she'll have a foundation.'" Silence. I stood, my voice steady. I pulled out the journal, flipped to the dog-eared page, and read, "I built for her even when she did not stand with me." That's all I said. Verity's face drained of color. Her husband whispered something in her ear, but she didn't move. Nobody did. I looked around the room. This isn't drama. This is history. And I'm not here to destroy anything. I'm just done disappearing. After the meeting, Giles met me near the foyer. He didn't yell. He didn't smile. "Did you really have to humiliate the family like that?" he asked. I didn't blink. No. I just finally used what was already mine. Verity walked up moments later, her voice low but sharp. "You could have waited. You could have asked." I pulled the journal from the folder, held it out toward her. "She asked you. Years ago. You ignored her then, too." She looked at the page I had open. Her eyes widened. Just a flicker. But it was there. I turned and walked toward the doors. Sunlight hit my face the second I stepped outside. Behind me, murmurs. Some were soft nods. Some were whispers. All of them were watching. Just as I reached for my car door, my phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. "They say there's a scandal about you circulating at the courthouse." I pulled into the courthouse parking lot with my hands tight on the steering wheel. My throat felt raw, but I told myself this is where masks fall off. I stepped out, dust kicking at my shoes, and walked in. Verity was already there, her posture straight, her lip curled just enough. A lawyer stood beside her. They looked ready. At the clerk's desk, I was handed papers I didn't expect to read or defend. A petition. My father's signature at the bottom. It claimed I was mentally incompetent to manage my mother's trust. Psychiatric documentation included documented therapy sessions, claims of canceled engagements, all twisted. I searched the documents, notes I never saw, letters never signed by me. I asked for proof of the signer, IDs, Witnesses. The clerk looked down. We need verification, I said, voice calm. They couldn't produce signatures or valid records. Verity watched from across the room, arms folded, expecting me to collapse. My pulse pounded, chest hollow. Oh, but I refused to crumble. They offered an evaluation, not my peers, but a state-appointed one. I nodded. If the truth was there, I would stand firm. I walked out and saw my phone lighting up. Headlines. Some kind. Many cruel. A news blog. Heir's competence questioned after a state shock. Commenters saying things like, people like that shouldn't control anything. My name spelled wrong, betrayed, judged. I sat in my car, breathing. Tears came, not from shame, but because betrayal cuts deeper when it's public. I replayed memories. My father's cold eyes, my mother's gentle smile, the way I held the house together in her illness. I whispered to myself a line she taped on the fridge years ago. You are not made to sit in the shadows of lies. I remembered what Dr. Langston told me. Healing isn't forgetting, it's facing the truth straight. I allowed myself that one moment of collapse, body heavy, heart shattered, but mind clear. Later, I checked out of my home and booked a small hotel not far away. The room smelled of stale carpet and perfume I didn't recognize. Cheap comfort. I fell on the bed fully clothed. Shoes on, eyes closed. I let the betrayal wash over me, but I also felt the sharp flame of resolve, reading, twisting, burning. I opened the folder again and found a clause handwritten by my mother. In the event of manipulation, the law will favor transparency. That clause meant everything. I wrote in my notebook, what I have, what they fear, what I refuse to surrender. I texted April. Tomorrow, let's meet. You were brave enough not to stay silent. That mattered. I folded the papers, zipped the folder. The room was dark, except for the lamp by the bed. Outside, the city lights flickered. I hoped for sleep but didn't expect it. My mind drifted, and the knock came. Tap, tap, tap. 3 short raps at the door. Silence. My heart lifted, then stalled. I woke up with my back aching and one shoe still on. The hotel light was still on, flickering faintly in the corner like it had been watching me all night. My mouth was dry. I sat up slowly, the heaviness in my chest dragging with me. It wasn't just fatigue, it was memory. My father's petition, the forged papers, April's voice whispering truths my family worked hard to bury. I opened the journal again, my mother's handwriting, delicate but determined. She knew this storm was coming. She didn't leave me weapons, she left me clarity. I stood, pulled the curtain aside, watched the early light push through the clouds. Scottsdale was waking up. I got dressed, navy blazer, jeans pressed, no jewelry, just enough to say, I'm not here to beg. I texted April. Bring everything you have, it's time. She replied with a thumbs up and a meeting location, Verity's office at 10 a.m. I had no appetite, just coffee from the hotel lobby, bitter and weak. But I wasn't going for comfort. Verity's building sat tall, glass all around, like it had something to prove. I walked in. The receptionist barely looked up. April was already there, seated, folders on her lap. She gave me a small nod. I nodded back. Verity appeared in a charcoal pantsuit, not a hair out of place. Her smile was tight. Let's get this over with, she said. We were ushered into a meeting room. Over-decorated, artificial plants in every corner. A few of her board members were there. The meeting agenda said, Review of Legacy Projects. What it really meant was, put Natalie back in her box. I didn't wait. I turned to her, quiet but steady. Why didn't you defend me? When Mom was sick, when you knew they were cutting me out? She blinked, took a breath. Her answer was practiced. Words about family values, duty, unity, but nothing personal, nothing true. April opened her folder and slid her phone across the table. She pressed play. Verity's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. Natalie's better off on the outside. She's too emotional to handle board affairs. We can't risk her taking control. The silence was instant. The tension was sharp. I didn't look at Verity. I watched the others, her allies. Their faces shifted. Some leaned back. One crossed her arms. April handed me a paper from her folder. It was a trust document. My mother's trust. A clause about hidden control. And Verity's signature, faint but there, scrawled at the edge like she hoped no one would notice. Her attempt to insert herself where she never belonged. Verity's face drained of color. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," I said, loud enough for all of them to hear. "But I won't disappear just because you're uncomfortable with my truth." Verity's hand trembled as she reached for the papers. I didn't let her take them. "You misfiled this on purpose," I said, hoping I'd never see it. "That ends now." I quoted my mother's favorite author, because the moment needed it. "You can't use someone else's story to silence your truth." I asked for an amendment to the trust, publicly recorded. I asked that the foundation include my name in board history and future meetings. April slid the audio copy to one of the attendees. I didn't need to say more. Verity looked at me like I'd set fire to her whole plan. "You'll break this family," she said. "You'll ruin everything." I looked at her. I didn't flinch. "If truth breaks lies," I said, "then let it break them. I'd rather be blamed than erased." I gathered my things. April followed. As we stepped out, I felt the dry heat hit my face. Traffic groaned. Strangers walked past. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to them, not to me. I got in my car, turned the ignition. My phone buzzed. A name I didn't recognize. Daniel Reeves, attorney. A scanned file attached. I opened it. The title, Change of Trustee, effective immediately. I woke before dawn. My body still echoed with exhaustion from the confrontation. I rolled over in bed, journal and legal folder beside me, eyelids heavy, but mind wide awake. The recordings from April played on loop in my head, my mother's clause repeating, "In the event of manipulation, the law will favor transparency." I needed proof, solid proof. I called Ephraim Blackwell, voice low but steady. He answered, saying he'd dug through 5 years of accounting ledgers, trust transfers, hidden memos, red flags, payments from Verity's accounts routed through shell companies. I listened, heart thumping. Then I reached another contact, a former client of the trust company who said ledger entries were changed after audits, that numbers got cleaned up quietly. That client agreed to meet. By midday, I felt the bitter flame of betrayal warm something in me. Clarity, not chaos. I drove to Verity's corporate office. She had no idea I knew. The lobby smelled like varnish and ambition. April waited, standing, files in hand. I gave her a nod. She gave back one. We walked into the boardroom together. Verity was seated at the head, surrounded by board members who barely met my gaze. The room gleamed. Polished table, crisp suits. Verity began speaking, praise for her vision, her leadership, the heritage she claimed to uphold. I listened until she paused, expecting applause that would never come. When she asked for questions, I raised mine. Why have I been sidelined even while doing the work? Why was my name never mentioned, though I stood in the shadows for this family? Her smile cracked just a little. "Roles are different," she said, voice smooth. "Not everyone is meant to lead." She avoided the question. I watched her flinch. April pulled out her phone. She played the recording. Verity's voice was clear. Natalie's involvement only complicates things. Too risky. The room shifted. Some board members exchanged glances. Others stiffened. I took a breath. Then I handed out printed copies of the ledger discrepancies Ephraim uncovered. Pages with transactions that didn't match statements. Verity tried to interrupt, says it's misunderstanding. But Ephraim spoke up, pointing to specific entries where signatures and dates were mismatched. Verity's signature tucked in margins, nearly hidden. One transaction labeled operations, but funds went into accounts I never knew about. I stood then, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother left a clause. She warned of manipulation, not as threat, as promise. Today, I demand transparency. I demand my name be in those records. In the board history, in everything. Verity's allies shifted, uncomfortable. Her protestations sounded hollow. "You'll tear everything apart," Verity said, voice tight. She tried to act hurt. I paused. I shook my head. No, what I'm doing is restoring truth. It's not tear, it's reveal. My chest burned, pride rising, fear simmering. I saw faces in that room, old ones and newer. Some looked away, some looked at me like maybe they believed what I believed. Maybe I wasn't alone. Then the meeting ended abruptly. Chairs scraped, papers shuffled. Verity gathered her followers. I stood last, holding my folder close. Outside, the air hit me with dust and heat and relief. I walked toward my car, head high. My phone buzzed. A message from someone called Insurance Counsel. Subject line: Claim, defamation allegation, Verity Kittredge. I froze. That claim doesn't scare me. It confirms I made impact. The Heritage Hall smelled of polished wood and watered plants that afternoon. I stood at the edge of the room holding a battered folder, Mom's journal, the heirloom box, trust papers. Verity opened with gratitude and tradition, her voice warm and hollow. She spoke about what the family had done for the neighborhood, how she upheld legacy while hiding nothing. Sponsors nodded. Local dignitaries clapped. I watched them and felt the weight around me, the history I carried, the omissions, the silences. When she paused, I stood. The room fell in that moment of expectancy. I raised my hand. Legacy isn't just what you preach, but what you preserve and what you try to erase. Quiet rippled through the crowd. Gasps, rustling of chairs, people turning. I opened the heirloom box, Mom's music box, engraved, small, delicate with chipped paint. Verity froze. I wound it. Its music cracked the air. Everyone leaned in. I said, "They can take things, but they can never take what's in your heart." The boardroom doors swung open under pressure after that moment. Verity looked caught off guard. Her voice came out sharp. "That is inappropriate. You shouldn't be doing this here in front of everyone." Flashbulbs popped, phones raised. I stepped forward, letting the audience be my witness. I handed out copies of an amendment, Mom's Plan B, signed, witnessed, filed, that named me successor trustee if manipulation arose. Verity's face paled. Her supporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats. She tried to laugh it off, stuttered about misunderstanding. But I had the signatures, notarizations, legal weight. I saw the color drain from her cheeks. I felt shock ripple through the room. I heard someone whisper, "She finally has what she deserves." I stood tall in that chaos. For the first time, the applause was not for someone else's speech. It was for someone finally speaking truth. I looked at Verity and said, "Peace without truth is a prison." Her eyes flickered. I saw resentment and falter. Her allies avoided looking at me. The audience shifted. I felt fear, but more than that, clarity. This is my moment, my name being spoken, my value being seen. The weight of years lifted just slightly off my shoulders. A journalist stepped forward, mic raised. "Miss Kittredge, with this document, Are you demanding that Verity step down as trustee immediately? I nodded firmly. If honor means anything, yes. Verity's lips parted, but no words formed. The amendment stood, legally valid, irrefutable. Cameras clicked. Someone called out, "Is there going to be a lawsuit?" I didn't answer. I let the moment breathe. Then, as the crowd churned, I heard a whisper from behind me. Wait until the night filings hit. My chest tightened. My hands gripped the folder. I knew this wasn't over. Not by far. A week had passed, just 7 days, but it felt like a lifetime. I sat on the porch of my new place in Sedona, watching the sun crawl over the red rocks. My mother used to call this hour the hush before the truth, as if the morning light held things we weren't ready to face the night before. I held a warm mug between both hands, the steam curling into the crisp desert air. Draped around my shoulders was the shawl she used to wear on nights she'd read by the fire, faded blue and hand-woven. The legal war was over. Verity had stepped down without a word to me, just a formal withdrawal, a signature on a PDF, and silence. The estate was mine now, not the property or bank statements, but the story, and the truth inside it. What I'd gained couldn't be measured in assets. It was something deeper, a claim to memory, to belonging, to the pieces of my mother too often rewritten by others. Natalie had said it best the night before. I thought inheritance was about money. But it's really about knowing where your roots run. Later that morning, I unpacked the last moving box marked in Sharpie. Mom's notes. Inside were old receipts, recipe cards, and near the bottom, a sealed envelope with my name in her handwriting. I hadn't seen that script in years. It was dated just 4 weeks before she passed. I opened it slowly. The letter was short. I'm afraid, not for myself, but for our truth. I worry someone will edit my life into something I wouldn't recognize. If this ever reaches you, don't let silence become your inheritance. Speak, even if your voice shakes. I read it again, slower. She knew. She knew exactly what they'd try to do, and she'd left the warning in plain sight. That moment changed everything. All the anger, the fights, the courtrooms, the cold stares across family tables, they weren't about revenge. They were about this. Her voice, still echoing through me. Her story, asking not to be buried. I remembered Eleanor Roosevelt's words from a poster Mom kept in her office. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. I had carried that weight for too long. Not anymore. Around noon, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but I recognized the number. Ethan, my half-brother. We hadn't spoken properly in years. I heard, he said quietly. You didn't have to go through all that alone. I should have stood beside you. He hesitated. I remember Mom crying some nights. I always wondered. I just never asked. We talked for over an hour. It wasn't dramatic or tearful, just honest. He told me things I never knew, how he used to sneak peeks at her journal, how he'd seen Verity shred letters. We didn't make promises or pretend to be something we weren't. But we agreed to meet. Maybe that's how healing starts, not with grand declarations, but with someone remembering your name. Natalie was reading on the patio when I came back inside. I told her about Ethan. She didn't say much, just smiled softly. Sometimes healing doesn't roar, she said. Sometimes it's just someone calling you by your name again. That evening, I walked down to the grove on the property. The earth was still soft from last week's rains. I carried the music box and a small note scribbled on a torn envelope. We remember you. I dug a shallow patch and placed the box gently into the soil, along with the note. Then, with care, I planted a sapling over it, a flowering dogwood, her favorite. As I stood, a breeze stirred the trees. For a second, I closed my eyes. I could almost hear her laugh. The past didn't vanish. It didn't forgive or explain itself. But it settled. I whispered, "The past shaped me, but I shape the future." Just then, a feather floated down in front of me. Light, white, untouched. I didn't move, just let it rest on the ground. Back inside, I washed my hands, made tea, and opened my laptop. An email sat at the top of my inbox. Subject: Historical inquiry regarding your mother's final research. It was from a professor at a university in New York. He'd heard of her unpublished memoir and was requesting access to review it for an academic project. Natalie looked up from her book and saw my face change. "What is it?" I showed her the email. She read the subject line, then looked at me. "This isn't the end," I said. "It's the beginning."